Hello everyone, Rachel Weaver here. I am on faculty and staff at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. I've been putting together a series of videos called The Story of a Book, in which we invite authors to tell us the story of how their book came to be in the world, both the process of writing it and finishing it and publishing it. So today we have with us Poupeh Missaghi. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Rachel. Good to see
Lovely
you.
to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So you are going to teach at LitFest here in the next few weeks. This is the first time you've taught at Lighthouse, or have you taught other classes before?
This is the third year at the LitFest, and I have also taught like several classes while I was in Denver.
Oh, good, good. So we're super excited to have you joining us this year for LitFest. You're teaching two classes, one on translation, which is next week, Monday, I think, Monday, June 1st.
Yes.
And then another called Writing the City. So today you are going to tell us the story about your debut novel, which came out in February of 2020. So just recently with Coffeehouse Press. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about it.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So this is the book, Translating House One. And as Rachel said, it came out in February. It was a long process. It took, I think, 7 years from the beginning till publication. And I started it as like classwork for one or two of my classes while I was doing my PhD at University of Denver. And it started as just like response to an assignment in a class, and I never thought it would be one book. I thought these were like different explorations in different forms and different topics, but then I realized it all needs to be one book. So for clarification, the book is hybrid and it has several different layers. So one is a narrative layer where the protagonist of the story, which is a she, goes around the city to look for statues that have been missing from the city. Then there is the documentation layer where we encounter details of final moments of lives of some people who were killed during the 2009 protests and afterwards in Iran. And then there is a meta-fiction layer where there's an I who talks to the audience about the book. And that layer also includes theory. It includes lots of questions about the premise of the book. And there's also some smaller poetic sections in between. And then besides that, there's also the dream section, which actually appears in drawings, kind of, which I'm going to show you. So it's like these. So we have like all these different formal aspects in the book. So I started with the city layer, and I wasn't, like the thread wasn't there. I was just writing these pieces about Tehran because I just missed being in the city. And then I was doing the documentation because 2009 was a turning point for me personally, and I wanted to go back and find out more about these events. So it was like personal research. And then on next stage, it was also wanting to document it as well. So like not just for myself, but as like documents, as an archive. The dream journal was happening separately. At maybe like midway through the project, I realized dreams are also part of this history, part of this city, part of this life, this time frame. So I decided to also incorporate them. But then instead of just using like the 200 pages of the dream journals, I turned them into word clouds. The meta layer actually came very late after I submitted the book to the publisher for consideration, which I can talk about a bit later. But the questions were in my dissertation, which became the book. but the other parts, the theory, was part of the critical companion to my dissertation, which was a creative dissertation. So it was kind of like a lot of like going back and forth and like reimagining how they were in conversation together. And yeah, as I said, like the questions already existed, but the meta part didn't exist. And then I combined those two later in the project. Yeah.
I have a question about hybrid text. So was the I imagine you having all of these disparate pieces that you just described, and I'm interested in how you figured out how to synthesize all of those. I mean, was it very clear to you? Was it a simple process? Did you try it one way and then try it another way? How did you go about figuring out how these potentially disparate pieces fit together seamlessly?
It's interesting, like even that was not clear from the beginning. I just knew that these layers were in conversation with one another. But the first version of the book, these layers were separate. Like we had the city part first, then I had the documentation, which is like corpses, entries, and then I had the questions and dreams appeared finally. So it was like having 4 books in one book. But I had some concerns about that format, and I was also imagining other possibilities where we would go back and forth between them. But I decided like finally to just submit it and get some feedbacks from an editor and see like how it worked. Like the main concern for me was the corpses documentation section. It's very heavy, it's very hard to read. So it took me years to write and research. So I was concerned about how my reader would be able to go through that. And also, like, would they even be able to go through that if they all appeared together? And with the questions, also the concern was, I liked how like they appeared all together, but I also wondered if they lost some of their impact after a while. So like I had reasons for doing it that way, but I also had other reasons for why it could exist in this other way, which eventually became the way that it is now. It's like weaves back and forth between different layers.
Mm-hmm. You're describing sort of the ideal way of working with an editor, I think, which is very collaborative. It sounds like that was your process, to have someone responding to the choices that you were making, and then helping you sort of navigate how to potentially layer it or present it in a way that you were getting the desired response from the reader.
It was interesting because like talking about like publishing and working with an editor, I submitted this to the open reading period for Coffeehouse. And when I got an email back, it was, this is amazing, we're excited about the book, but we also have some questions. And one of those questions was mainly why this specific format for the book. And so I responded to those questions, and I added, I also have envisioned this book in another form, which is like a woven format. And they asked me if I was open to also doing that and sending it back to them. And interestingly, at first I thought that would be, oh my God, like I have to do that. But I just did that, like, I think in 10 days, like 2 weeks. Like the turnaround was so fast because it already, like in my mind, it existed in that way as well. And then the rest of the editorial process was just finding like more like nuanced choices of what to keep, what to edit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about Coffeehouse Press? They are a mid-sized press that takes submissions from agents as well as authors, correct?
Right. So they accept submissions from agents, but they also have an open reading period. The year before I submitted, I was still working on final edits for the book, and I think like I checked, and the open reading period was, I think, from September to, let's say, December. And then I was like, okay, so like I have until December, maybe I can finish the edits and send them back. And then I realized, like I checked later, and I think like they said, we got so many submissions that we had to close down the submission period. And I was like, oh, okay, perfect. I didn't even finish them. But so the following year, 2017, when I submitted, I had my alarm set for 12 o'clock midnight when the submission period opened. And I just like sent it out that very night. And they changed the system that year to, we will read the first 200 submissions and then close after that. And you never know when that 200 ends, right? And I'm not sure if it was 200, but there was like a specific number. So yes, they are based in Minneapolis, nonprofit, they're mid-size. They were actually my first choice for the novel, so it was quite amazing to get them to be interested in the book. And I'm thankful, like the editorial process, like everything has been amazing to work with them. Yeah, publicity, like everything, like I can't ask for anything else.
Do you have any advice for folks that are working in a hybrid form? Sometimes I think it can be a little isolating, possibly to be trying to figure out sort of a new format or an unusual or a different format for a book. So I wonder if you have any advice for anyone who is working on a similar type project.
That's a great question. I think finding the right community to be in is very important. I think like the program at DU offered me that community, and I can't imagine, like I'm not sure if I would be a writer who takes as much risks if I was not part of that community. And I agree, like it can be very isolating if you do this on your own, and then like everything, like a lot of the publishing market is doing like a very different type of work, right? So I think it's just like a matter of like finding the right journals, the right authors to know that there are people out there that you can be in conversation with, rather than like being overwhelmed and thinking that this doesn't exist, right?
Well,
thank you. If that's helpful.
Yes, I think so. Thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on the publication of your novel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks.